Good evening. I now want to address an issue that has been raised by a volunteer of Swarn Bharat Party. He's actually not a volunteer, but I would say a supporter. His name is Raj. He has been writing a lot on my blog, and we also published one of his videos about free speech on our website of Swarn Bharat Party. Raj has repeatedly and insistently told me that he doesn't agree with the idea of state funding of elections. And today I want to sort of address this issue for Raj as well as for others who would have, potentially similar concerns. So the main point that I have for Raj's consideration, or for anybody else's consideration, who is liberal, who wants to have good governance, good policies. How do you exactly intend to contest elections? So I, for one, have absolutely no capacity to contest elections. Financial capacity. I'm sure that I can actually produce phenomenal results for the country. But it's not for me to spend my own lifelong earnings for the sake of the people of India. There is a fundamental thing about self-interest that has to override the interest for the country. This is a fundamental liberal principle that we have to look after ourselves first, then our families, and only finally the country. And looking after the country is a joint responsibility. It is not my responsibility alone. It's not your responsibility alone, Raj, nor anybody else's individually. And those who take it on upon themselves as the nation coming first are actually deceiving themselves and deceiving the country. And invariably such people tend to be either dictators or very corrupt. We've seen that repeatedly in world history. Everybody, starting from, you name it, all the dictators have all said our nation must come first. And you have the Stalins, you have the Maos, you have Hitlers, and so on. And so those are the kind of people who will somehow become demagogues and rouse the crowds with some frenzy. And in that process, what they would do is they would create a situation where the whole country is beholden to them and to their ideas. And at the point that country loses its own individuality. So I don't think we want to have that first. So if we are clear that if I'm not going to say sacrifice myself and work for the country by throwing away all my earnings for the sake of the country, contesting elections and potentially losing in some cases. Many of us who contest will lose. That's a probability. I mean, you have about 30 odd candidates on average, I suppose, in India in an average constituency. 15 candidates, 20 candidates, 30, sometimes even 60. Now, most of them will lose. Okay, so what is the point of spending your money if the probability is so high that you're going to lose? And on top of that, note, Raj, once you get elected under the current system, the payments given to MPs and MLAs are so small. The salaries are so extraordinarily small. And what they do is they hide the whole thing by providing them perks and free tickets, air tickets, and this and that, and other amenities. And they also give them this so-called money for their constituency, which is basically misused, essentially, by all these people for their personal gain. Largely, I would say, at least. So what are we trying to do here? We are trying to mislead the country through this bogus method of off the record payments. We do not have a transparent method by which honest, good people can be attracted and join politics. And what we are saying is, now you are telling Raj that people should actually squander their money for the sake of the country. And I'm sorry, but you're not going to get anybody competent in that process. Under no circumstance you're going to get people like me. And I consider myself very competent for in matters of public policy and matters in which I can actually provide the right guidance and direction and vision and leadership to the country. People like me are not going to contest elections in India. Okay, under no circumstances would you find them coming forward. You definitely will have people like Arvind Kejriwal who think they have a vision, but they are actually those dictator-type fellows that I just told you about. They are people who are socialists. They are going to come and say, we will serve the country. This is our fundamental job. We are here to serve. Everybody comes first and all that stuff. And they will not talk about the fact that what about the incentives of the people who work and put their life and their time for the sake of the country in terms of representation. Are they being appropriately remunerated? Are they being appropriately funded for their elections? And that is not something that these kind of people will talk about. So what we are saying is, Raj, that the vast majority of our problems in India are due to the fact that a good majority, I would say a vast majority to be precise, is because we have some hopeless and corrupt fellows and self-seeking people in politics in India. Because these are the kind of people without morals who can happily, mislead, who are very good at misleading others by saying, hey, we are here to serve you. We are putting our whole life on the line. Hey, Modi, the corrupt fool, he's basically telling everybody he has got nothing and so on. And yet we know he takes all the bribes, his great suit that he had and the fancy stuff he wears. Well, that's potentially all coming from corrupt money. I mean, he's a crony capitalist. He's been supporting all sort of cronies, and we know his history of supporting them for the whole of his life. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to build a system, Raj, by which good, honest people can start entering politics. And the only way to do that is to give them an assurance that the money that they spend in elections will somehow at least partly come back to them. So let us say that I go and start, campaigning in some constituency in India. I must have the assurance that if I put in, say, 10 lakh rupees of mine in the campaign, I put out posters, I hold meetings, I organize various events, I spend 10 lakh rupees. Then I should have the assurance that if I have contested well, there is going to be some return on that 10 lakhs at least. That way I have a chance of putting myself forward, because otherwise I will not put myself forward, and neither will you. And therefore, Raj, the idea of your opposition to state funding of elections is not justified. And I have explained it further in length, the actual mathematics and the logic of this. If you read Breaking Free of Nehru, you would figure out very easily that this is not a viable exercise to expect good people to throw away their lifelong earnings and savings for the sake of the country. You don't want that, I hope. Liberals do not want people to sacrifice themselves for the sake of the country. The country is basically everybody's responsibility. I've explained at length in the Breaking Free of Nehru in the first chapter. We must all work together. Otherwise, there's simply no point. We're going to get dictators and socialists and all sort of lunatics and demagogues in the political circles. If you want sensible people who are honest and who are competent and who actually can provide the right kind of framework and advice and guidance, you need to compensate them, and you need to make sure they don't lose money. Now, this is not a game where you're going to get good people by making them lose their money. I'm sorry about that, Raj. So you better change your mind, because SBP is absolutely right. We have a right policy in this regard. You are wrong here. You better study. You better learn incentives. You better learn economics. And sorry, you can't expect others to sacrifice for your benefit. All right? Okay, thanks.